Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I am your host, JP John Poz. With me today, very special guest, former three-time WWF World Tag Team Champion, former NWA Tag Team Champion. He is Mr. Barry Darsow. Barry, welcome in. How you doing?
John, I am doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Now, before we kind of jump into it, I want to talk about your new book, Sickles, Studs, and Stolen Cars, The Many Faces of Barry Darsow. Yes, there it is. Tell us all about the new book.
Well, I'm 66 years old, and I never thought that I'd write a book in my life. I had a business for, after I kind of got out of wrestling, I had a business for 14 years with a buddy of mine, and we sold the business, and I thought I was going to be retired. And Bill calls me up and he says, Barry, we're going to go on the road a little bit more than normal here. And I said, well, what is that? And he goes, I want to go out at least twice a month. So it ended up being 3 and 4 times a month. And we've been doing this for years now and really enjoying meeting all the fans all over, because, in our day, we never got to talk to them very much. But now we're talking to all the fans and having a great time. And they keep saying, Smash, when are you going to write a book? Or Demolition, when are you going to write a book together? So I thought, well, now it's time to do that. And I called a couple of buddies of mine and told them I'm writing a book. And they said, yeah, you got us. That's kind of how it all got started. I just wanted to tell a couple of stories, how I got in the business and some of my friends that are in the book. And, I got a million other stories to tell and everything, but the book would have been too big. So I had to keep it at 300 some pages.
That is great. So how do you put it together? How do you actually get it together? I mean, it's like a lot of think tank sessions there.
Yeah, I've been hit on the head many times and I don't remember a lot of things, but once I kind of remember a story, then I can really dig down deep into it. And I was just thinking about a few things growing up, what I've done in my life. And I thought, well, how can I put this into the book? And so I tried to make it easy reading. So if you read it, it would be like you were right there in that instance. So I think it came across like that. It's one of those books where you could, read a little bit of it, set it down, get back and read more. It's something that where you don't have to do the whole book at one time. So that's kind of how it all kind of started.
It's funny. Some wrestlers like, oh, I don't even remember that match. And then all of a sudden something jogs their memory and they're like, oh my God, backstage this. And then they remember the whole thing. Then all of a sudden they remember the whole match. It's like something jogs the memory.
Yep, that's exactly it. And the friend of mine that helped me write it, he was asking me questions and he was really good about pulling things out of me, and that was really how it is. Because, I have no clue how to write a book. So I needed somebody to help me do that. And that's what he did.
Man, what a career too. Think about, obviously, so many incarnations. That's why it's the many faces of Barry Darsow, right? I mean, a lot of people would, obviously Demolition, Smash, everybody remembers that, but a long career and obviously Crusher Khrushchev. So, you had a lot to cover here.
Well, and that's kind of why I wanted to write the book too. A lot of fans didn't even know I was all these characters. They look at you and they go, oh, well, that's Smash. Well, now they know that I was the Repo Man, but they didn't know I was Crusher Khrushchev and the Blacktop Bully and Tsar Mongo and Man Mount Dar. It just goes on. And I've had the greatest life out of anybody. I think I've been very lucky. I've been healthy. I still am healthy, and I've just enjoyed life. I can't wait for I hope I live to be 100 and some years old just to see my great grandchildren. I love it.
The only thing that I, kind of when thinking back, that damn Tully Blanchard, when he got you in the head, he probably, messed up some memories there. Tully, you know what I mean? He's
that one, I've taken a lot of shots to the head. I've taken a lot of bumps where you've hit your head and, rattled your brain, but you never really thought about it because you're back in the ring the next day. When I got hit with that chair, I was knocked out cold and I didn't remember a lot of stuff, and even talking about it right now, I can feel that hit.
Wow.
And I've talked to Tully about it, a lot, and he didn't even really realize how hard he hit me. And it was funny. One of the last times I was with him, he goes, Barry, I seriously didn't know that it was that bad. And I said, well, I didn't want to really let anybody know at the time because, we were getting the big push. You guys, we wanted to get you guys over. And that was the start of the angle with Andre and Haku, so I really couldn't really talk about it that much like I wanted to, because I need to work the next day. And I remember the doctors telling me, hey, you got a concussion and you need to, go to the hospital and all that. And I was like, well, do I really have a concussion? And then they kind of said, well, maybe you don't, but they knew I did, and still got headaches all the time and, forget things. But, like you say, once you start remembering things, and I go back and now that all this has happened to me, I really try to go back and remember things, and numbers are my worst thing. I can barely remember my own phone number. I got to really think about that, or my address. And I go back and I really try to think of numbers and memorize numbers and this, and I really try to make that happen, and, I know I got a problem, but, sometimes I don't.
Man, crazy. Like when you're injured, especially back then, you can't come off the road because that's how you make the money, right? I mean, you just got to keep working.
Exactly. And once you get a top spot, you don't want to, go to the office and say, oh, I got a headache or whatever, I need to take a week off. You take that week off, you're not champions anymore. Somebody else is going to take your spot. And that's just how it was, and that's why, when I wrote the book too, it was like, can I do that? Can I remember things? And, some things in there I might have exaggerated a little bit by not trying to, but that's what I remember,
Yep.
And I had a lot of fun doing it. And Bill and I have been talking about it on the road. We're going to do a demolition book coming up.
Oh, nice.
That'll probably be ready, later next year sometime, because that's going to be a hard one. We're going to really get down to some serious stories and real things that have happened to us on the road.
Love that. I know Bill has had a book separately, but obviously you have this book separately too. So that'd be awesome to kind of combine it and get a real demo book.
Yeah, that's what it's going to be, and we're going to have fun doing it too. We're both of us are the same. We don't like to knock the business. We don't like to say bad things about people. We're trying to make everything positive, and I think that's what needs to be done in real life, is just look at all the positive stuff, don't look at all the negative stuff. And that's kind of what I was trying to do in the book.
How long did it take you to put it all together? Like, when did you start? When did you kind of get it completely finished?
It was probably about a year, and I talked about the book, writing a book with other people 2 or 3 different times. And I just wasn't ready for it. And then all of a sudden, just one day, I was, talking to Dante and over in Scotland, and we just said, you know what, let's do the book. And that's when it all came about.
Not bad though, a year. You hear some guys like, oh, it took me 8 years to write this. So not bad, 1 year. That's not bad at all.
Well, but I've thought about it for so long.
Right.
It took me, and it's 4 or 5 hours, every other day here and there. It's a lot of hours in that time. And when I'm traveling too, you're leaving on Friday mornings and coming back late Sunday night or whatever. And then all of a sudden, you get home and you're tired, and then you get the call, well, let's start writing a book again, and now you're 4 hours on there. You don't see your family, and, it gets to be a long process. But, when the final product is out there, then it's pretty exciting, and the hardest part is, I got so many stories and things about my life, and, what do you put in the book? And, I read the book and I go, God, it's a great story, but why didn't I put that story in? Or why didn't I put, it's like, how do you do that?
Yeah, you almost have to leave stuff out because you had such a crazy long career.
Yeah, I've left so much stuff out. And even in the stories, some of the stories I tell, there's so many things that went on top of those stories that you can't put in there. Otherwise, that's a book. I got a story in there about Ernie the Cat Ladd. And he was just such a character, this guy. And I had so much fun with him, and he helped me a lot early on in my business. And I thought that was a really important part of my life to have him in there, you know. So it's a pretty funny story in there about him.
Love that. Gonna have to check that out about the big cat, Ernie Ladd. It's interesting,
we actually got pulled over by the police, and it's a good one.
It is always interesting to me, like who kind of runs into who, and like what the scenario is and where. And hey, we're in a dirt road, and we're getting in a street fight. Or, like it's just crazy, like the pairings and who kind of is traveling together, or runs into each other, or when you hear the history, like wow, Big Cat Ernie Ladd and Smash, like wow, that's weird.
Yeah. I when I first went down to Watts' territory, he came up to me and he says, Barry, I know you don't have any money, you don't have anything, you don't know anybody. He says, come and stay with me. I got a 2-bedroom apartment. We're not going to be there much, but it'll be a place for you to crash. And I said, Ernie, I really appreciate that. So I roomed with him, and it was good and bad. I don't think he ever slept. So we'd be on the road, 250 miles somewhere, and we'd come back, and it'd be 2 a.m. You got to get up at 7 or 8 a.m. to go on the next trip, and I'd just fall asleep, and all of a sudden, he'd be yelling, Darsow, get in here, let's play a game of cribbage. It's like, Ernie, I got to get up and go to the gym yet and do all that. Let's play. It's just like, that was the bad part of it, but actually it was good, because then we'd start talking about the wrestling matches that I had that day and this and that. So, but good man.
Crazy when you think about like your run. I always even forget about Mid-South, that you kind of were in Mid-South for a while.
Oh, that was really where I learned. That was, Bill Watts taught me so much. When I was in Atlanta, and I was Man Mountain Darsow, and then Ole Anderson came up to me and he says, Barry, he says, I got to get you out of this territory. He says, I don't really have a place for you, but you need to go down to Bill Watts and really learn how to do interviews and work and all that. And I told Ole, I said, you're exactly right. Let's do it. So when I got down there, right away, Bill Watts, he was like a real father figure to everybody in the territory. Everybody was young there. And when I was Man Mountain Darsow over there, I just didn't feel comfortable or anything. And he told me, he says, Barry, you got to be a heel. And I said, I want to be a heel, because I didn't want to be a babyface. And that's when I really learned how to work. And he told me, he says, I'm going to make you a Russian sympathizer. You're going to be an American that hates America and loves Russian, and 𝐔𝐈𝐒 Volkov is going to be your partner. And as soon as he said 𝐔𝐈𝐒 Volkov, I just went, I love it. Let's do it. And then I really learned how to work, and I figured out interviews, everything. And it all clicked, and then now I'm working with the Junkyard Dog and Hacksaw Duggan and Magnum TA and Terry Taylor. I'm working with the top guys in the territory, and you can only get good by working with those guys.
That's unbelievable. And then, of course, everybody will remember Crusher Khrushchev when you actually become the Russian, and you're with Nikita, and you're with Uncle Ivan. So Ivan Koloff, obviously. So that very, very interesting. Like obviously in the '80s, Russia's like the big heel. So that's perfect.
Yeah. And when I left Mid-South, I went to Florida Championship Wrestling, and Eddie Graham was my boss there at that time, and he kind of let me do anything I wanted to do. And he asked me, he says, well, what is it you want to do? And I says, I want to get teamed up with Jim the Anvil Neidhart, because we were friends. And I said, we'll be a great heel team. And I said, I'll be the Russian, Crusher Khrushchev, and I'll make him the sympathizer. And then we ended up having David Sierra was our manager, the Saint, and he was a Cuban assassin, and we had so much heat down there. And then, in the territory popped, we were making some good money. And then, Flair was coming in a lot of times, and Rick kept saying, Barry, you got to come to Charlotte. And I said, I got such a good gig here. I can't leave there. And he says, no, you really need to go. He says, one of your buddies is there, Nikita Koloff, Scott Simpson. And he says, you need to partner up with him and Ivan and really help Nikita get over because he's going to be something. And I said, well, have Dusty call me. I'm not going to just quit because you're telling me to, And so then Dusty called me up and said, Barry, baby, you got to get here. And I've met Dusty over the years. And I told him, I said, I just can't go. I'm making too good of money here. And he says, Barry, I promise you're going to make more money here than you make there. And I didn't have a guarantee or anything, but everything just sounded good. So I put my notice in down there. And then that's when I went and was partnered with Nikita and Ivan. And great part of my career. And every time I thought, now I'm a professional wrestler and I'm as good as you're going to get, I learned more and more from all the different guys you work with. And, being with Ivan, it was like, wow, what a great coach he was.
Very interesting, though. Like, you kind of take a chance. You know what I mean? There's no guarantees, but you just trust in Dusty and you make the jump.
Yeah, and I've done that my whole wrestling career. Everything I've ever done is, you trust where you're going and you hope you didn't get lied to or anything. And but I was always very confident. If I didn't make it there, I could go somewhere else because I was an athlete and I knew I could make it in this business. So if it didn't work out there, I'd go to another place. And at that time, there's territories everywhere. And now I had, a group of friends in every different territory. I could call them up and say, hey, can you put in a good word for me? And I knew I had a job, and all the time I talked to the Road Warriors and I talked to Rick Rude, and that's who I was in camp with. So, I knew I was going to have a job somewhere.
Man, those Minnesota boys, holy moly. What a crew. Maybe the greatest crew of talent from one state and one area ever.
I appreciate that. I agree. They're great guys, and you got Curt Hennig and Brady Boone and John Nord and Scott Norton and Wayne Bloom and Mikey. And I mean, you could just keep naming off names. And, it was pretty neat that Eddie Sharkey and Vern Gagne trained us all then. And, one of the greatest things is when you got your friends and you're going to wrestle them at night. And, you're like a bunch of kids in the locker room. You're away from your families and you're having a good time. And all of a sudden the one thing you wanted in your life was wrestling. And now you're wrestling your friend that's in the ring. That's a pretty neat deal.
Imagine like at least 10 guys, and you just named basically all of them, and LOD and Rick Rude, and like and like, oh my God, they're all in wrestling. Oh, they all made it big, and they're all and like all great, like crazy that they can happen.
Yeah, and Kevin Kelly, Nails, I mean, it just, yeah, it's been a great life.
What's in the water over there in Minnesota at that time, right? I mean, that's just crazy what's going on.
It was the beer.
I believe it. Eddie Sharkey and the beer. There you go.
Eddie Sharkey and the beer. Yeah. I can't complain about my life. And it was funny when we were in camp. We were all bouncers at the same bar and everything. And
right.
Eddie Sharkey brought us in there, and it was like when he said, it was about 2 a.m. He says, I'm going to get you all into wrestling. And we were looking at Eddie like going, yeah, right, sure, because we were all real wrestling marks. We all loved wrestling and never thought you'd ever get in. And then when we were at camp, beating the crap out of each other, and he never really smartened us up. I mean, we were hurting. We're thinking these wrestlers got to be tough, And all of a sudden we learned that you got to work these punches a little bit and these kicks and these slams. And, now you kind of figured it out a little bit. It was like, wow, this is how it is, So when Eddie introduced us all to Ole Anderson, that was the real start of us getting in the business, was Ole Anderson.
When that's going on, do you see like, okay, these guys are going to make it, these guys aren't? Or do you think like, well, we're all going to make it? Because it kind of happens. You basically all made it.
Oh, I knew we were all going to make it because we were a different breed of people at that time. It was, you had the Crusher, the Bruiser, Baron von Raschke, all these guys. And all of a sudden you got these 20-some-year-olds that were, I was 320-pound power lifter, and Rick Rude, freaking monster, animal. Yeah. I mean, we were big guys that could take bumps. And at that time, it was big guys, and they really didn't take bumps unless you're like Ken Patera, and that's kind of who I wanted to be like, was like Ken Patera. But there was only one Ken Patera. The rest of them, you know, did the big man gimmick, you know, and so I knew if we were big guys that worked like smaller guys, we were going to make it in this business, and we all did, you know.
Man, what a crew! Like, I can't even think of, like, there's other states where, like, okay, you know, they had a bunch of your guys, but not that many, not 11, 12, 13. Like, it's remarkable how many guys came from that, basically that area.
Well, you know, a lot of getting in the wrestling business is who you know, and the promoters and the other wrestlers have to trust you. You know, that's a big thing. So when one of the guys would be in the territory and, you know, would say good things about you, then the promoter would say, you know what, let's bring that guy in. And that's kind of how it was, you know. And it was like when I left Crockett's territory, when I quit there, right away, Ricky Steamboat, you know, I'm at his gym and he says, Barry, I can't, you quit, you know. And I told him the story and everything. He says, well, you want me to call Vince? I said, yeah, well, yeah, sure. I eventually want to go up there, but I didn't think I was going to go like now. You know, I needed a break from being on the road for, you know, 4 years. And he says, well, here, I'll call him right now. And I was like, you're going to call Vince McMahon right now? Well, we're at the gym and he calls Vince and he gives Vince my telephone number, and he comes back to me. He says, yeah, Barry, I just talked to Vince. He says, he'll give you a call tomorrow morning. I was like, oh, wow. You know, and then Earl Hebner calls me and says, hey, you know, David's up there. He says, I'll have him talk to Vince for you. I said, yeah. I thought the more people that went to Vince and said, hey, call Barry, it would only do me good. And next morning, Vince calls me up and there you go. So that was the buddy system, you know. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. And I've done that for a lot of people. You know, I talked to Vince about Rick Rude and, you know, Kurt Hennig and all these guys when I was up there, and bingo, bango, here they go. Yeah.
Love that. So how does that conversation, obviously Steamboat and Hebner and all the buddies helping you, how does that turn into Smash? Because it's like, okay, Bill Eadie, the Max superstar, he's Axe. You got Randy Colley, maybe it doesn't really work out. So how do you become Smash?
Well, it was just perfect timing. When I quit Crockett, you know, the word got out that, you know, hey, Barry just quit, you know, and he's a hell of a hand. And Randy Colley didn't work out with Bill. So they were looking for another big guy that nobody really knew in the New York territory, you know, where the New York TV was. Because back then you had, you know, TBS in Crockett's territory, and then you had New York. And they were both all over the country. But if you were a NWA fan, you watched that. If you were a WWF fan, you watched that. So when I had the opening to go up there, nobody really knew who I was in that territory. So it just so happened that when he offered me that job, I jumped at it. And Bill, you know, Vince said, well, I got to talk to Bill Eadie first, because he's the main guy that's going to either hire you or not hire you. It's up to him. Well, I've met Bill a couple of times, and all my friends knew Bill, and all of Bill's friends knew me. So it just so happened, yeah, he's the guy, because nobody up in this territory really knows him. So that's kind of how I got the job. It was just a perfect timing, good friends, and, you know, I knew how to work.
How did they explain the Smash gimmick to you? Like, hey, by the way, we're Demolition, we're Smash, we're kind of like Lord Humongous from Mad Max. Like, how do they, you know, from like the Road Warrior movie? So how do they kind of explain the gimmick to you?
Well, you know, and they never said any of that to me. I sat down in a room, and I met Pat Patterson and Terry Garvin, and then Vince came in, and they had a book with all these different characters in there, and they went through the book, and so I never knew anything about the Demolition. I never saw their TV. I never knew Bill was on TV with Randy. I didn't know any of that. So I'm just thinking they needed a guy with Bill, you know?
Yep.
So they went through the pages and they pointed out that picture of the Demolition, and it looked a little bit different of what we were. And Vince says, how do you like that character? And I looked at it and I went, I love that character. And I never pictured Mad Max or Road Warriors or anybody. I just pictured me and Bill being those characters. And he says, well, I'm glad you said that because, you know, and then I had to sign a non-compete that I couldn't tell anybody what this was, you know. So he says, or I should say it's kind of a verbal non-compete, you know. So he says, well, it's up to Bill and I'll get you two together and you can talk about it. So we talked about it and Bill goes, yeah, let's team up together. And he says, we just got to kind of figure out what our role outfits are going to be and what our, you know, what kind of face paint we're going to put on. And I looked at Bill and I go, I don't have a freaking clue what I'm going to do, you know? And he said, oh, me neither. Let's just play around with it. So early on, you could see some of the paint faces we had just was terrible. We didn't even know what to put on our face, you know?
Yep.
And it was kind of, it wasn't thrown together, but it kind of was. It happened so fast then all of a sudden that, you know, we just had to, you know, do it. And that's how it all came up, you know? And after the first time we got in the ring together, we got back in the dressing room. Bill looked at me and says, this is going to be good. And I said, Bill, this is going to be freaking great. I said, I really feel good about this. And I said, once we learn how to be a team together, it's going to be incredible. And shoot, 1 or 2 times together, I knew everything he was going to do. He knew everything I was going to do.
Love that. That's awesome. And of course, with like the Road or the Mad Max movie, there's the Wes character, which is like Hawk and Animal, Legion of Doom. Then there's Lord Humongous character, which is more Demolition. So people are saying it's like, oh, it's so much like LOD. It's the same movie in essence, the character, but it's completely different. Lord Humongous is this, and then so it's from the essence of the same movie, but LOD and Demolition are completely separate as far as gimmicks, to me anyway.
See, and you know what's funny is all the years I was Demolition and they were the Road Warriors, and you know, time went by. Bill and I were done. We weren't the Demolition anymore. I never ever heard of the comparison, the Road Warriors and Demolition. Not one time, not one fan, not one thing. But now 10 years later, all of a sudden, somebody says something about it, and then now that's what everybody talks about. It's like, you know, I never heard that, you know.
Yep.
And maybe I just, you know. And Joe and Mike, we were best friends. You know, we grew up together. We in camp together, and I never really thought that we were the same as them. You know, until you know, like you bring it up and other people bring it up, and you know, it's funny to hear that.
I always thought though with Demolition, and I love LOD, easily one of the greatest. The pops are amazing, but I always thought Demolition was better in ring.
Yeah, I those guys were incredible, and you know. What made those guys was Paul Ellering, because Paul Ellering helped tell them, hey, you beat the crap out of these guys. You look good. You don't work with these, you know, Paul was a huge, huge factor in the Road Warriors. And nobody really talks about Paul Ellering, you know what I mean? But, you know, being in the business, starting with these guys, I knew what these guys knew. And they had to have outside help to help them, just like I had outside help. I mean, we were young in the business, and you know, to work with the guys that we worked with, you had to be in the business for quite a while to be working main events, and they were working main events right away. You know, so I give a lot of credit to Paul Ellering on that too when you mentioned the Road Warriors. So.
I just always thought Demolition, completely different style. Like you mentioned before, like big guys that would sell a lot. Like you guys would sell more often than obviously than they would.
Oh, our goal was whoever we worked with was to have the greatest match we could ever have. And the best guys for us to wrestle weren't big guys. It was smaller guys that could sell so much that that they could make the biggest comeback ever, because then we would fly for them. Whatever we could do to get that pop for those guys, that's what we tried to do, you know. And I think it was a little different for the Road Warriors. You know, they were still strong. They'd take bumps, but they were still strong doing it, you know. That's where we were completely two different ways the way we worked. And we could work with every single tag team, you know.
When you look at it too, I think Demolition, you could say arguably the greatest WWF or WWE tag team of all time, the longest title run for decades, had the longest title run. Was that something that they kind of tell you, hey, you guys are going to be like our team during, the golden era, during the Hogan era, like you guys are the guys, or they don't even bring that up to you? It's almost like, let's see how over they can get.
That's a great question. Bill and I didn't go to the office or, tell the office what, we wanted or anything. We just did our job. So I can remember Pat Patterson coming up to us and saying, you guys are our guys. This is what you have to do, But we were very professional. So it wasn't like they had to tell us what to do. It's just like, you're our guys. We want a good match with these guys. And then we'd have a good match. If they said, you need to look strong on this one, then that's all they'd have to say. Because we knew the business, and when they said that they're going to put the titles on us and you're going to have them for a long time, we knew what that meant. It meant that we got to have great matches with everybody, and we need to put guys over, and otherwise the matches would be the shits, So they knew we were professional, so they didn't have to go into all the whole details of everything. So they'd come with a finish with us, and we would do it. We'd do the whole match, and but we had the greatest tag teams of all time at that time too. It wasn't just one or two teams. It was a dozen tag teams. Every one of them could have had the belts, But I think with us, with the face paint and the leather and all that, it kind of was a mystique for a lot of the fans, and that's where the merchandise sold and all that. So I think, if I wasn't Smash and I was just a wrestler outside there, I would look and I'd say, you know what, the Demolition needs to have the tag belts, and they need to be heels, because as heels, we could take bumps and we could, cheat to win and all that and get more heat than if we were smaller guys and cheat and win. It just was I think it was just a good thing for the WWF to make us tag champs.
And I think too, it's like, okay, these guys are the most over guys in the best tag team division of all time, but you guys kind of, maybe stood above the pack just a little bit over the, the Hearts, the Bulldogs, the Rougeau, the Killer Bees. I mean, there's a million good tag teams, but Demolition's so good. Not only that, they're getting so over as heels. We kind of have to switch them babyface. And Survivor Series 88, they switch you guys, and you guys are become even more over, like just super over.
Yeah, and Bill and I talk about that a lot. It's like, we wish that they wouldn't have changed us. It just wish that we would have just had matches and had it change on their own. You know what I mean? But it was they just thought that, now that, we're beating on people and the crowd's starting to go crazy liking it. It's like, well, now we got to make them baby faces. They should just let us keep doing what we were doing. But, it worked. And I liked being a heel a lot better than a babyface. One of the matches that really sticks out was when we worked with the Brainbusters. We had 2 or 3 falls with those guys, and that team really made us baby faces. Out of all the guys we worked with, they made us work hard, and they were heels in that match. We couldn't be heels anymore. So, if you go back and look at that match, you can really see how they were heels and we were baby faces, because we had to sell for them and they kept us strong, But that was a fun match with those guys.
Love that, because it's so different. You get obviously Arn and Tully versus you guys. They're like the bumpers, but they're the workers. But they're so nefarious. You know what I mean? They are such heels. I mean, you cannot root for them at all. There's nothing, worthy of, especially with Heenan. Like, you want to boo them out of the building.
Well, yeah, and they're such, Bill and I really like to work hard. They made you work hard, because if you didn't keep up with them, you looked bad. And that. It was fun to work with them, and me and Arn have been best friends forever. Again, now you're in the ring with one of your best friends. I mean, it was really a good fit and a good match. I really enjoyed that. That was a great part of my career.
That's one of those things too. It's like, wow, they were, basically tag champs for like a year and a half. It's well over a year here, and then they make the switch. But then it's more interesting because then obviously we want you guys to get the titles back.
Yeah, yeah, and that was the start of the angle with Andre and Haku when Andre passed Tully the chair, and then he hit me over the head with the chair.
Yep.
That was the start of that angle with Andre. You know.
When you look at that too, I always thought that was like amazing because obviously Andre's advanced in age here; he's a little bit older. But anytime you're feuding or have a feud with Andre the Giant, there's so much attention to it. Obviously, one of the all-time greats. Some people put him on the Mount Rushmore, no problem with that. But it's one of those things where it's like, wow, Andre the Giant's in a tag team. Like that's just like this is awesome. You know what I mean? It's just like the level. It kind of raises everybody up to the main event.
Well, yeah, now, you're wrestling with the one guy that's I mean, he's as big as you could get in wrestling. Yep. People outside the business knew who Andre the Giant was. That's how over he was like that, And I mean, Hulk was over big, but Andre was who helped make Hulk Hogan that big too. So just the opportunity to get in the ring with Andre, it was incredible part of my career. And he was a great guy. I loved Andre. I had a lot of good times with him. And, him and Bill were very good friends. And, you wanted him to look good too. He was very limited on what he could do. His back hurt so bad, his knees were bad, everything. And, just being how iconic he was, you wanted to make him look so good because then it made you that much better too. So very enjoyable. And Haku, one of our great friends, it just, like I say, I've had the greatest life in the world.
When Bill starts getting advanced in age, because I don't know if people realize this, he's probably 9-10 years older than you are. So yeah. when Demolition is kind of moving along, yes, they were the most over team. Yes, they get the gigantic pop beating the Colossal Connection WrestleMania 6, but it's like Bill's starting to get up there in age. He's starting to wind down, right? So now you're gonna kind of have to look for maybe Crush, a third member of Demolition. Did you like that, or did you think that was maybe maybe not the direction you wanted to head?
Well, no, Crush was great. It was that part of our time. Bill was going to get a job in the office, and Bill ended up having an allergic reaction to shrimp and almost died. So that it was they needed to keep the Demolition going because we had all these different bookings and everything. And then when Brian came in, it was kind of working, So then Bill was like our manager and getting ready to go in the office. And then Brian and I were out being the Demolition everywhere. But it was never the same as, Axe and Smash. When Crush came in, it was Smash and Crush. And it's hard to take a main part of your tag team and put somebody else in there. And Brian did a hell of a job, but it was just not the same tag team,
And then they actually end up bringing in LOD to feud with Demolition, which was great. So not only do you have the best tag team of all division of all time, then you throw LOD in the mix and you bring them into the WWF. I mean, that's like, wow, man, they just keep adding on to the division here.
Yeah, and I thought that they jumped the gun way too much on that. They never should have had us wrestle each other. It should have been maybe a year down the road. It's almost like we should have even all became partners and went against everybody kind of a deal, or, we wrestled, the Bulldogs, they wrestled the Hart Foundation, and we never got together, but it took a year to really create a great angle. And then it would have been so much better matches because I didn't really care for the matches that much. It was just one of those where we kind of clashed, They were good, but they weren't great matches,
They hot-shotted it a little, you think?
Oh, hot-shot it big time. It's just like, let's put them together. And, they wanted to get the Road Warriors over so much that it hurt the Demolition, and I think it hurt the Road Warriors. It, if they would have did it more right, they would have really got the Road Warriors over, and we would have loved to have got them over. But it just, when you just have one or two matches that don't mean anything, they just don't mean anything.
Would you have rather not had Crush in Demolition and kind of went in a different direction for your character? Or were you thinking like, okay, I'm going to get Brian over. Like, I'm going to help this guy get to the next level?
No, I wanted Crush at that time. I didn't want Demolition to stop. I love the gimmick, and it just I don't really know exactly what happened with it, but it wasn't getting over. We were just a regular tag team now, and I didn't want to be a regular tag team. I wanted to be a top tag team, and we were good, but it just things were different.
Definitely. It's crazy too when you look at like the Hogan era, and people always think like, oh, title changes, this and that. Hogan's champ for basically 5 years. You guys are champ for like a year and a half. Honky Tonks Man is champ for like a year and a half. So it's like those long title runs, people really love it, especially when the team of the guy is over. People love those long runs.
Right, right, and that's what I was used to. It was hard to lose Bill as a partner, even though Brian was a great partner and a great guy. It just it wasn't the real Demolition. It'd be like the Road Warriors when the Road Warriors split up and they weren't together anymore. They weren't the Road Warriors anymore. I mean, you take the British Bulldogs, and you take Dynamite out of there. Now you don't have another British. It's not the British Bulldogs.
Yeah, you lose the essence of the team, basically. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, because back then the team was the biggest thing. It was, you're in the WWF as a tag team, and if you're not that tag team anymore, it's like, why are you there? That's almost what it is. And then if you become a single, you have to get the big push to really mean something, or you're just a regular middle guy. And a lot of times from the tag, you don't get that big push. It took a long time for Bret to get, Bret Hart to get his big push from him being a tag team. He had to work his way up, but he was just such a good worker. You had to give him a push. I mean, everybody he had a match with was phenomenal. I don't know if I've ever seen Bret Hart in a bad match.
Me neither. Always had put the other guy, making him look like $1 million. Usually had the other guy's best match of his career, usually.
Well, exactly. And that's how it was in tag matches too. Jim was a little, tougher to work with, but Jim, if you worked Jim Neidhart's gimmick, Jim was great at what he did. Bret, he could work with anybody at any way, and I mean, it's kind of hard to explain. But when you found out that you're working an angle with the Hart Foundation, it's like, all right, this is going to be great, because you got the character Jim Neidhart, and you got the freaking worker that can do anything, and we can do anything. So we can take care of Jim. We can take care of Bret. Bret can take, it just was a great fit for us, the Hart Foundation.
Love those matches too. It always felt like, you guys would hit a home run with those guys. It was almost like automatic. It's like, this is going to be great.
Now I want to get in this book. I want to get some of those matches. I mean,
yeah,
that's what I'm saying. We get to talking, and then I start remembering things and remembering matches. A little bit of a deal that you probably don't know, but we had a match with I think it was SummerSlam. It was Jim and Bret, and we were at Madison Square Gardens, and we worked a deal where we were going to get heat on Bret. Well, the heat spot was going to be, and I don't think anybody even knows this, but so you got a first here.
Yes, awesome. I love that.
We were going to work up a heat spot to help, have Fuji get involved in it. So we were working it, and we told Fuji to put the cane in the corner. And then I don't know if it was me or Bill, we were throwing Bret into the corner, and he was going to hit his shoulder into the cane, and the cane was going to snap. Well, we told the TV guy that the heat spot's going to be that. So have the camera right on the cane. So when Bret hits that, it shows Fuji put the cane in there. Bret hits it, the cane explodes. That's how we get the heat on him.
Yep.
Well, the cameras missed it. So he hits his shoulder on there. Then the camera goes over there, and the people didn't even know that the cane is what got the heat on him.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? So, but when he hit that cane, it was like, he hit that turnbuckle so hard, and he always did. It was unbelievable, and they missed it.
Wow. Come on, guys. Oh, my God.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
But that was the whole heat on Bret.
Wow. Look at that, jogging the memory there. Wow, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, man, that's crazy they missed it, though. You know what I mean? That's crazy.
So Asbury Park is where you live.
Yes. Yes.
Bam Bam Bigelow. I had some good times with Bam Bam.
Oh, he was the best. To me, one of the best big men ever. I don't know why he doesn't get brought up more as being, you know what I mean, like one of the best big men ever. I know people mention him, but I always think, man, he's got to be up there, top 5 at least.
Yeah, I went one time we were traveling to, I think it was Denver, Colorado, and we had like a day off. And I'm from Minnesota, so I fished a lot, and he's from, did a lot of ocean fishing and everything. I said, hey, Bam Bam, let's go fishing. He says, yeah, let's do it. Where do you want to go? I said, well, let's go to Pikes Peak. There's a lake up there. So we talked to a bunch of stores and everything. They said, oh man, it's way up there. He says, it's going to be hard breathing up there, So Bam Bam, we go and we buy these fishing rods and everything. Bam Bam buys this mask with oxygen. And I said, what are you doing? He goes, well, he said you can't hardly breathe up there. I said, you're going to be fine. But he buys this thing. So we're getting up there, and we get out of the car, and I'm like, holy cow, we're way up here, And he says, he puts the mask on. He's, well, I feel like $1 million, It was just funny. But we ended up catching some fish in the stream, and we had a good time. He was just a good guy, Bam Bam.
Nice. I love Bammer. It's such a sad ending, but what an awesome wrestler. What a look. He just looked like this guy's a pro wrestler. You know what I mean? If you saw him walking down the street, like that guy's a wrestler. He just embodied wrestling.
Yeah. It's just like, there's so many stories. It's unbelievable.
I wanted to mention this, obviously, because of the book and the split face on the book, but I wanted to mention the Repo Man. I got to think about that game, because it's like, okay, Smash is great, iconic. Repo Man's iconic for another reason. Obviously, you get the action figure, everything else, but what an interesting time in the WWF for one of those wacky Vince gimmicks.
Well, what was, at that time, everything was a gimmick.
Yes. Yes.
Nobody had their regular name. It was Macho Man Randy Savage, just the Incredible Hulk Hogan, the Powers of Pain. It wasn't their real names and everything. So when we came up with the Repo Man gimmick, it was kind of like that,
Yep.
There was it was a fun gimmick for me in my life, because Demolition was done. I was kind of winding my career down a little bit, and I just wanted to have fun with no pressure, and I wanted to work with all the top guys. And when Vince and I were talking about it, I came right out to Vince and said, Vince, I don't need to be Hulk Hogan here. I want to be the guy that's going to help get Hulk Hogan over. I want to be a middle of the top guy. And he's looking at me like, I love this guy. There's not too many guys, but I knew what I was, I knew my place in the business, and it was fun. I worked with Savage, and I worked with Duggan, and, I worked with all the top guys. And eventually I wanted to turn babyface and do things for Make-A-Wish, and I wanted to play golf and, have a good time. And I did. I had a great, great time.
Is it one of those things where you mention it to Vince and he's like, you're going to be the Repo Man, like you did in the past, so he's going to somehow make it happen, like TL Hopper? Oh yeah, I was a plumber, and then now you're a plumber, like that kind of thing.
That was it. I repoed a few cars, and when we were talking, I told him that, and he says, well, how are you going to put that into the business? And I says, well, I'm going to steal things from kids. I'm going to have so much heat. It's going to be, and I told him a couple of stories, and he laughed, and he goes, you're going to be the Repo Man, and that's how it was. And right away we had vignettes where I, kick the windows of cars in, and I'd steal the car because the guy was a day late on a payment, or, steal a kid's bicycle. I had some serious heat.
Or steal Macho Man Randy Savage's hat.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a shoot too on that one. Yeah, he was really mad at me for stealing that hat. I'm
Whoa,
glad I didn't.
whoa.
I'm glad I didn't stomp on it because he probably would have killed me if I would have did that. But yeah, he was really mad at me.
Whoa, how was it? Did they? I guess they didn't tell him that you were doing that.
Oh no, they didn't tell him. They Vince and I were talking in the back, and Vince, I said, Vince, what do you want to do here? And he goes, I want you to steal his hat. And I said, Vince, I can't steal his hat. I said, that's his biggest thing. Don't touch my hat, and when he'd wear it out to the ring guy had to be just perfect with it and set it in his spot and everything, and nobody touched his hat. And Vince was laughing. I said, all right, I'll steal his hat. And I went and I stole it, and the look on his face, well, he was pissed. And he chased after me, and I was running for my life. I thought, I'm glad he didn't get me, but we laughed about it later on. He goes, oh, I'm glad you didn't wreck my hat, It was, but that's what makes the angle, when it's real.
Did you blame Vince though? Did you say, hey, it wasn't my idea?
No, I didn't say anything. I didn't want to do John him or anything.
That's great though. Like on Vince's part, like, all right, let's mess with Macho Man. Let's just steal his hat.
Vince was quite the ribber. He loved it when the guys would rib each other and all that.
Savage was like that neurotic though. He was that kind of like crazy about certain things that did.
Oh, he was nuts about that stuff. You don't mess with his gimmick.
Tough guy too, apparently.
So I think when he came off the top and gave me the elbow, he probably put a little extra into it to get me, But
it is funny. Some wrestlers that I talk to, like, there's like, oh, he doesn't really. Some guys put the elbow on the other side, so it's almost like they land with their armpit kind of thing. Sometimes you land on your knee if you're Macho Man, so you take some of the impact. They're like, well, sometimes no. Like Charles Robinson, the referee, he has a story about how he broke his sternum from Macho Man, and then Randy Eller, who's another referee, was talking about how he literally Savage put his armpit, so he completely missed kind of on purpose, and he landed very softly. So you hit or miss with Macho Man on that elbow.
Well, Randy was really good about it. He took care of it. He was light as a feather, but no matter how easy somebody is coming off a top rope, it gets you, and you really can't control when you're coming off exactly where you're going to hit somebody. You're in the air, and I'm a pretty big guy too, so it's how does he take all of the blunt? It's different when if I was a littler guy, but when you're big, you got to hit him.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
I mean,
he took care of you.
6'1", 235 too. I mean, it's not like a light guy or a small guy coming off the top.
But it was a lot easier taking that than having the snake put on me from Jake.
Ooh.
I like the elbow better than the snake.
Not a fan of snakes, I take it.
I don't really care for snakes. No.
I don't know anybody that really does, except for that I know, like maybe Jake, and obviously Macho Man got bit by it. So I mean, not Macho either.
Yeah, I don't even know if Jake liked the snakes.
Yeah, that is true. He kind of was just like, well, it's my gimmick,
It's my gimmick.
Yeah,
I'm sure some of the snakes he liked, other ones he had a hard time with, but Jake was a good guy. I just saw him not too long ago too. He's a great guy.
When you're looking at it, right? I mean, obviously there's so many characters and different guys, the Repo Man. I always kind of like laugh and think like, I think people forget, and when you were in WCW, Blacktop Bully is actually kind of a cool gimmick and like kind of, that's an interesting one. But like the golfer, like what the heck is the golf? Like that's a crazy gimmick. You know what I mean? Like I think people forget about that.
Yeah, I was hoping that I was going to get John Daly as a manager, and we could have the greatest time, and that was kind of my goal, but it never happened. But I was playing a lot of golf in my life, and I wanted to get on the celebrity golf tournaments, and I played in a few fundraisers for golf and everything. I really enjoyed that, so I just thought if I could get over on TV as a golfer, then people would want to play golf with me, But it got ixnayed pretty fast.
That was your idea, though, to do the gimmick?
Well, part of my idea. Yeah, all of them are part of your idea and then the boss's idea. But, the Blacktop Bully was one of my favorite gimmicks. And I was just on a show with Eric Bischoff and Conrad on their podcast. We were talking about it. And Eric fired me because I Dustin and I both had blood in the match, in a truck match.
King of the Road.
Yeah, King of the Road. And I thought that gimmick was going to go a long ways, and then we got fired, and that was the end of that. But that's the business, you know. You never know what's going to happen.
Did Eric apologize on that show for doing that?
Well, yeah, you know, he felt bad, but it wasn't him. It was the office. It was the people above him that they had to fire us because there wasn't supposed to be any blood on TV or anything, and it just happened. So we were the scapegoats on the deal. But you know, he promised he was going to hire me back, and he did. So Eric, I really like Eric, and he's got some character for doing that. You know.
My only problem with the firing and that stuff, it was taped, so they could have just edited. No, I mean, couldn't they have just kind of let it skirt and let you guys kind of, because it was taped, you know what I mean? Like, couldn't that just have kind of gone by the wayside?
Well, they actually did cut out a bunch of it, but you could still see blood in the match.
Yeah.
Even, you know, everything we did, you could just see.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
So it's hard to edit, you know, and you know, looking back at it, you know, they had a helicopter, they had a truck, they had pickup trucks with camera crews. They had millions of dollars into this match, driving, you know, the police, you know, stopping roads when we drove by. I mean, it was a big thing. So, you know, you bleed on there when you're not supposed to bleed, which we were told to bleed. And it's like, you know, it's a major thing with Ted Turner's company, you know.
Yep.
Eric's got to get rid of somebody, and let's get rid of the wrestlers.
Man, that match had to have been a little scary, though. Think about all the stuff you just said, but also the fact that it's possible you guys could fall off the truck if something isn't held correctly. I mean, it's a moving truck with cages on it that could literally maybe tip over. I mean, it's got to be kind of scary, right?
Well, yeah, you know, and what was really tough was we were going, you know, 55, 60 miles an hour down the road, and then he'd slam the brakes on. So you really did fly. And there were steel bars that you'd hit. There was, you know, steel fencing. It was a pretty dangerous match, you know. And plus, there was like hay in there, and there was, I don't know if it was horse poop or cow poop or whatever, but you know, and I have a, you know, hay fever and all this other stuff. You know, I mean, I'm hacking and coughing, and you know, it was a fun match, and Dustin is just a great guy. And what a worker he was, you know. But it's hard to have a good match in the back of a truck too, you know. What are you doing?
Yeah, you just like punch and kick, and then, you know, then the guy slams the brakes, and you guys are going flying.
Right. But
crazy match. Is that Dusty idea?
No, Mike Grimm came up with that idea.
Wow.
That was all his match. And it was set to be an annual deal, like every year have a King of the Road truck. So that's why I knew this was going to be a top spot. It was going to be huge for my career. I mean, it was, you know, but it got ixnayed in an awful hurry. Somebody didn't like it, you know.
Man, that is like such an interesting idea. Obviously, very memorable. People still talk about it, you know, 30 years later. So it's a very memorable idea for sure.
Yeah, it was.
I don't know, safe though. I don't know about safe.
It wasn't safe, but
yeah.
But you know, you look at, you know, Undertaker and Mankind when he's coming off the top of a cage. That ain't safe. Ladder matches, holy cow!
Nope.
Flying off top of ladders onto tables. I mean, these guys are, you know, the Hardy Boys. Oh my God, are they unbelievable? I mean, just all the different tag teams that, you know, the stuff that they do. These guys are fantastic, you know.
Absolutely. Now, obviously, I feel like Demolition, right up there with any of those teams that you mentioned, the Hardys and all these other teams, the Usos, the longest running tag team champs, you know, great as well. Where do you kind of rank Demolition amongst all the teams of all time? Where do you kind of put
Well, I got to say we're the best. You know, how can I say we're not? Right.
Mount Rushmore with you guys in it. Who's like the other three teams you'd put up there with you guys?
Oh man, no, that's tough. I mean, the Road Warriors are up there. Hart Foundation, British Bulldogs. You know, I mean, shoot, Tugboat and Earthquake. Andre. I mean, they're all unbelievable. It's, you know, who is the best? I think they're all the best. It's just, you know, what the people think. I just think that we were very good. We could work with anybody, and I think we pretty much had, you know, if you had 100 matches, if you had 1,000 matches, we would say there was probably only one that we weren't happy with. I mean, every match we had, we'd come back to the dressing room and we'd hug, and I'd say to Bill, that was the best match we ever had. And then our opponents would come up and, oh, all right, you know, and the next night you work with somebody else, same thing. Every night it was like that. We loved it, you know, and I think that was why we were successful, is we loved it. And right now, you know, I'm going to Tulsa, Oklahoma this weekend with Bill, and I can't stand being on the road doing all that stuff. But as soon as I see Bill, it's like, I'm glad I went on this trip. I love it. And then you talk to some of the fans, and it's just like, this is the greatest gig ever, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, last weekend I was in Nashville, this weekend Tulsa, the next weekend Winston-Salem. Yeah, it just goes on and on.
Love that. With that, obviously you and Bill back together, the Demolition, traveling the roads again. Hall of Fame, WWE Hall of Fame. Is it crazy that they're not in as far as the Demolition? Like, it's crazy you're not in the WWE Hall of Fame.
You know, there's so much to that, and there's so many great tag teams, and it'd be an honor to be in the Hall of Fame. But you know, you never know what's going to happen. You don't know what their thoughts are. We just you know, re-signed with them. We signed a contract with them last year.
Legends deal, nice.
Yeah, so you know, I think we're in good terms with them, and you know, Triple H is there doing a hell of a job. So, you know, I don't know what the factors are. I know the Undertaker's got something to do in there, you know, Shawn Michaels, all them. We've always got along with all those guys, and they've all been great guys. So, you know, it just depends what their thought is, you know, who they're going to push. You know, we got some action figures coming out.
Yes, awesome.
I suppose if they're going to do well, then they'd probably want you in the Hall of Fame. So then it does really well, you know.
Yep.
You know, and then maybe videos or whatever. There's so many factors to it, but you know, whatever happens, happens.
As we head towards the wind down here, head towards the finish, have to mention too the Demo Pod. You're doing a podcast as well with Ryan.
Oh yeah, you know, like I said, I thought I was retired. Holy cow!
yeah, no.
On the road, a book, and the Demo Pod, and we're having so much fun in that Demo Pod. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yep.
We started that thing. We've done probably 10 different ones, and when we started it, it just, you know, it was like, well, we're at these shows, and I started kind of doing a little bit of the Twitter or the X or whatever, and then it ended up being, well, let's do a podcast, and that's kind of how it all started. And what's funny is Bill and I, we don't have a clue. You know, we don't have time what we're doing. We don't know how the computer works. It's like when they sent, you know, Ken sent us the link for your podcast. It's like, now what do I do? You know, on the computer. How do I, you know? So here I'm this old guy that don't have a clue about life, trying to learn all these new things, you know, and that's kind of how the podcast is. And we just try to have, you know, tell some fun stories about our life, and now we're getting ready to start bringing some of our friends on, you know, and I don't want to say who we're going to bring on, but we're gonna have some good guests on there too. So we're just having fun with it.
Nice. Give us one last big push for the book, Sickles, Studs, and Stolen Cars: The Many Faces of Barry Darsow. Give us one last big push for the book.
Yes, I hope that I hope you come and, you know, you buy the book. I had a great time writing it. It was a lot of fun. There's some good stories. You can buy it on Amazon, and when I'm at shows, I'm going to be bringing a few books with me too, and we can sign them. But I think you're really going to enjoy it. And with, you know, Christmas coming up, buy it for, you know, somebody for a Christmas present. I think it'll be a great one. But you know, and all the people that have bought it, I really appreciate it. You know, let me know what you think about it.
Good stuff there from the book. Where can everybody find you on X, like you mentioned? What's the handle?
For what's that?
On X, where can everybody find you on Twitter?
Oh, at Real Demo Smash. And then we're on Instagram, Search and Destroy You. So
Love that. I actually recently got an awesome from my buddy Tommy Fierro, an awesome Demolition poster. I probably can't see it; it's in the back, but Tony Atlas drew it, and you guys signed it. So
Tommy
awesome
Fierro
stuff.
is he's like our manager now. You know,
Yes.
he's a great guy, and really watch him around. He's on X all the time, and he's a good guy. He's really promoting us a lot, and he's a good friend of ours. So
I love that. He's got the wrestling collector store. He's got 80s wrestling. He's got ISPW.
Yeah.
He's got all the conventions and stuff, and Demolition is there. Hopefully more often than not. So great stuff.
Yeah. In fact, he just invited me up to his store up there. I'm gonna do a little book signing up there. I don't know exactly when it's gonna be.
Awesome.
So pretty excited about that. So,
awesome.
But John, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And
thank you for all the time. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you take care of yourself, and I just want to say thanks to all the fans too. Without the fans, there wouldn't be wrestling.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate all the time.
All right, you take care. Alrighty.
You too.